The apartment was unnervingly quiet after the TV clicked off. Jared sat unmoving on the love seat, a thin, threadbare piece of furniture that had seen better days, like everything else in the small, dimly lit space. The walls were lined with shadows, shifting slightly as the pale glow of the moon filtered through the window, casting a silvery sheen across the room. Outside, the world seemed calm, oblivious to the storm churning inside Jared's head. He exhaled, the sound breaking the oppressive silence, and pushed himself up. Each step to the kitchen felt like wading through quicksand. The phone on the wall rang out like a gunshot, slicing through the stillness. He stared at it for a moment, almost hoping it would stop. But it didn't. "Hello?" he answered, his voice hollow, almost foreign to his own ears. "Hi, is this Jared?" The voice on the other end was soft, familiar. "Yes. I'm sorry, who is this?" He pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a throb of exhaustion behind his eyes. "It's Sarah. I was just wondering where you were. We were getting worried, with you not being at school for the past month, and soccer practice. Is everything all right?" There was a note of desperation in her voice, a plea wrapped in forced casualness. Jared stared at the countertop, tracing an old coffee stain with his finger. The silence stretched between them, each second pulling taut like a string ready to snap. He wanted to tell her everything, unload the weight that had crushed him, but the words were stubborn and thick, choking him. "Yeah, I'm fine. Look, I am sorry. I have to go. I'll talk to you later." The words came out clipped, like someone had carved them out of stone. He hung up before she could protest, the sound of the receiver clicking down echoing in the hollow of his chest. He whispered an apology to the emptiness around him, feeling the tremble in his voice reverberate through his entire being. He walked down the hallway, past the cracked photograph frames that lined the walls. His parents smiled down at him from one picture, their arms draped lovingly over his younger shoulders. In another, his best friend Alex was mid-laugh, eyes bright with the carefree mischief that had once defined their bond. Both gone now, taken in ways that made the world feel twisted and unjust. There were no explanations that could soothe the ache of their absence. Jared stepped into the spare room, the room where he now spent most of his nights. It was stark and cold, the white walls bare except for a single poster of a faded soccer team that seemed to mock him with memories of better times. In the center was a desk, and on that desk lay everything that had consumed his thoughts for the past few days, a tape recorder, headphones, a microphone, and a gun with its holster. He sat down heavily in the chair, the creak of the old wood protesting under his weight. For a moment, he stared at the gun, the dull gleam of the barrel almost hypnotic. His fingers trembled as he reached out and traced the cold metal. He took a deep breath, willing his mind to be still, but it raced on, full of whispers and shadows. "It's my time," he began, pressing the record button. His voice was low, rough with a month's worth of unshed tears. "My closest friends and family are dead, there's nothing left, nothing at all." He paused, the silence pressing back against him, unrelenting and suffocating. The memories clawed at him, each one more vivid than the last. His father's deep voice reading bedtime stories, his mother's warm laughter echoing through the kitchen, the wild afternoons with Alex that stretched into nights full of shared secrets and dreams. One by one, they slipped through his fingers like sand, leaving only the cold ache of reality. "Tell me this," he continued, his tone wavering as a tear rolled down his cheek. "If you own an animal that is suffering, is it not cruel to let it rest? To find peace in the grave?" The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. He wiped the tear away angrily, as if it betrayed the numbness he craved. "Yet you let me live in this eternal pain." The words came out as a snarl, directed at no one and everyone. He glanced down at the gun, the weight of it calling to him. It was a promise of finality, an escape that felt far kinder than the daily torment he endured. Jared's vision blurred as more tears fell, splattering onto the desk. He hesitated, feeling a tiny, desperate voice in the back of his mind whisper that there might still be something worth holding on to. But it was so faint, so easily drowned out by the cacophony of grief and self-loathing. His finger moved to the trigger, the cold touch of the metal sending a shiver up his spine. "Out of all the things I went through, I plead with you, find reason with my choice," he whispered, his voice breaking. He closed his eyes, drawing in a final breath. The room seemed to tighten around him, pressing in from all sides. Just as the hammer clicked down, there was a sharp knock at the door, startling him enough to loosen his grip. The gun slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor, the sound piercing the silence like shattering glass. Jared gasped, staring at the gun as if it had come alive. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Jared. I know you're in there." It was Sarah, her voice frantic and loud enough to carry through the thin walls. He remained frozen, unable to move or speak. The adrenaline surged through him, heart pounding as if it wanted to burst out of his chest. "Jared, please. Open the door," she called, desperation evident in the cracks of her voice. His legs moved on their own accord, numb and shaky as he walked to the door. He reached for the knob and paused, feeling the cold sweat trickle down the back of his neck. He turned it slowly, and the door swung open to reveal Sarah, her auburn hair messy from the wind, eyes wide and red-rimmed with worry. "Jared," she breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. She looked past him, eyes darting to the room and the gun on the floor. Her expression shifted, pain and realization colliding in a raw, unfiltered moment. "Oh my God. Jared's voice trailed off, the confession dangling between them like a noose. Sarah didn't wait. She stepped inside, closing the distance and wrapping her arms around him. The hug was fierce, grounding, and so full of life it left him gasping for air. "You don't have to go through this alone," she whispered, her voice trembling as she buried her face in his shoulder. "Please, don't shut me out again." Jared stood there, stiff and unresponsive at first, before the warmth seeped into the cold that had wrapped around him for so long. His hands found their way to her back, gripping her as if letting go would mean the end. The dam inside him broke, and the sobs came, harsh and unrelenting, shaking his entire body. It felt like an eternity before they both moved, sliding down to the floor, tangled in a mess of grief and relief. They sat there in the dim light, the silence between them no longer suffocating but heavy with shared understanding. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jared felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a small, fragile hope. The kind that whispers that maybe, just maybe, there is still a way forward.